Welcome on in to the Third Round Reversal Fantasy Football Podcast. Brett Malma here with you, along with Zach Malma. Zach, we are already in Week 8. I mean, this NFL season is flying by.
Yeah, it's crazy, Brett, and obviously it's sad because that means fantasy football season's almost halfway done. It is halfway done, but still a lot going on, a lot of news coming out, and excited to get into it.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy, just in terms of how quickly this season has gone, and now trade deadlines are coming up pretty quickly, and so we're going to give you guys some of the latest and greatest here in the football world, and make sure that you subscribe to us on YouTube, wherever you get your podcast. Give us the thumbs up. Also, make sure you get the comment there below. We will be answering as many questions as we can. And Zach, let's start here with some big news that came out a couple ago. It was Chris Olave. He got arrested for some reckless driving. He was traveling 35 miles an hour over the posted speed limit, 35 or he was traveling 70 in a 35. Seemed pretty apologetic about it. I mean, I'm not sure what his availability is going to be like for this week. I guess we're going to find out some more from the coaching staff and how he progresses through the week, but not great here.
Yeah, it's not great for a guy like Chris Olave, who's kind of struggled to start this season. Hasn't been like typical Chris Olave numbers. He did have a solid game. The last couple have been really solid for him. 7 receptions for 96 yards 2 weeks ago against Houston. And then last week, 7 receptions for 57 yards. No touchdowns in those games. But the second one was against the Jaguars. Like, solid outputs, but we definitely know that there's more from Chris Olave. We can see more from Chris Olave. It's just, I feel like the chemistry with Derek Carr just has not gotten there just yet. They're still figuring things out. Obviously, the offense has gone through a couple injuries. Carr was dealing with an injury as well. So that definitely set back Chris Olave a bit. But I feel like a guy who's expected to be really, really solid and maybe a wide receiver 1 for some people, including myself. Like, it's been disappointing so far. And of course, off the field issues, you don't want that getting involved if you're a Chris Olave owner.
Yeah, not sure what the NFL is going to do. Obviously, the speeding incident we saw obviously earlier in the season where it happened with Jordan Addison, not too much came out with. But as far as the Saints go, Dennis Allen did say today, we want him to keep himself and others safe, and said that we're not going to make more of it. So it doesn't sound like it's too much of an issue. Just a notable thing that happened this week. Derek Carr also seemed to be optimistic he's going to play this week, but obviously, fine or whatever. But it is something to keep a note of in terms of potential discipline that might come down the pike.
Yeah, and obviously if there is something that happens, you're obviously going to have to make some changes. Olave's, like I said, been struggling so far. Hopefully you've maybe upgraded your roster and find a guy really close behind him that can help you out if he does miss a week or two.
Yep. So right on to the next one. Bijan Robinson. Was a pretty interesting situation. What happened? There was no sort of report about Bijan, and it would seem that he was going to be completely healthy going into a game. Doesn't come out until about halftime after he doesn't get any work in the offense. Comes out at halftime from the broadcast that he wasn't feeling himself, and so didn't really know what to make of it. Bijan comes in with about a minute left on a drive that would have went. That set up Young Hoku's game-winning field goal. So that was pretty interesting. And then it comes out that he wasn't feeling good on Saturday night and may have lingered into Sunday. And so, yeah, the handling is right now being investigated by the NFL. Arthur Smith, was made clear during warmups that he wasn't going to be using Bijan. And so, yeah, I mean, Zach, what do we make of this situation? Obviously, Bijan practiced in full today. It seems like he's going to be full go, but a lot of unhappy people in the fantasy and betting communities from this past weekend.
Yeah, I'd like to thank Arthur Smith as well as the Atlanta Falcons for losing me my matchup in 3 different leagues this week. So thank you to them. That definitely hurt. And, of course, Bijan just one attempt for 3 yards, it's disappointing. Like, it's disappointing. Obviously, the illness going on. If we knew about it, we definitely would have like made changes in lineups to figure it out. Obviously, it's under investigation, but that doesn't. I'm not going to be handed a win, Brett. So definitely an annoying situation. And in the end, you just have to move on. And you're starting Bijan on Sunday if he's playing.
That's true. I think that just the only thing to take out of this is the NFL being a little more open about what's going on with the players. Maybe they start putting back the probable tag in, things like that. Right now, it seems to have just been questionable, doubtful, and out. We lost the probable tag a few years ago. Maybe that comes back. I don't know where to go forward with this, but I just know that in the world that we're in right now, with so many sports betting outlets that are out there, as well as the fantasy community, I think that they're going to have to be a little more open as far as the money goes, if they're going to support all of these different things.
Yeah, I think that definitely stands out, Brett. Just something to really look at in the next couple of weeks. That it's under investigation right now. So I mean, the NFL, it kind of loses some people if they continue to do things like that. So obviously, something needs to change on that end.
Yeah, but just from a fantasy football perspective, seems that Bijan's fine, gonna play as per usual. Put it in a line.
Yeah, completely.
All right, so then we go into some of our injuries from the last week. Jerome Ford, he got banged up, diagnosed with what was described as a low-grade high ankle sprain, and that's expected to come on the sidelines for 1 to 2 weeks. Zach, listen, before he went out, he looked great. He had 11 carries, 74 yards on a touchdown, huge run, 2 catches, 20 yards on 4 targets. And it seems like he is going to miss the game. They haven't officially ruled him out, I don't think. But it seems like he's going to miss the game against the Seahawks. I mean, if that's the case, is Kareem Hunt come this top running back option?
I think looking at the Browns right now, I wouldn't say Kareem Hunt's a top running back option. I'd probably put him in RB2, like low end RB2 area, because thinking about it, just it's Kareem Hunt and all of these good things, but I think Cleveland will find different ways to try and move the ball around. They're also going up against a Seattle team that on offense they put up a ton of points. Like, they really can put the ball in the end zone, so they're probably going to have to either play catch up or just stay with the Seattle Seahawks in this game. And I think that route's probably not Kareem Hunt. I think Kareem Hunt's a solid option right now. Like I said, low end RB2, probably a flex play is where I'd put him. But I think looking at it, Seattle's defense is pretty solid so far this year. I think they're in the top 10 or so in rushing yards allowed per game. So that's definitely not a bright spot for Kareem Hunt. But I'd put him in your lineup as a flex option. Of course, the touchdowns are what stand out here. He gets a ton of touchdowns. He's had 3 in the last 2 games. So definitely put him in your lineup. And if he falls into the end zone, great. You got a bunch of fantasy points.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. Low end running back 2, I would say right now. If you do have better options, obviously stash him in that flex spot right there, I think. Yeah, I mean, listen, he wasn't that effective. Yes, he did score the touchdowns. He got 2 of them. Only had 10 carries for 31 yards, though. Didn't add anything on the receiving. Had only 1 target. Didn't catch. Pierre Strong's getting a lot of hype right now. He had 8 carries for 25 yards. So, I don't really make much of it. I think you're in a bind, then you're having issues because it's not a bye week this week, as we'll get into as we start to get into our schedule. So you probably have some decent options of flex consideration or running back 2. And so I'm staying away from Pierre Strong Jr., though definitely I think I would put him more on the radar.
Yeah, definitely, Brett.
All right, so move right along here. DK Metcalf, he was considered a game time decision with a hip and rib injury. And despite being able to log some limited practice times. He wasn't able to suit up last weekend. And it ended up being the Jackson Smith-Njigba show, I think, and a little bit of Jake Bobo. Smith-Njigba caught 4 of 7 targets for 63 yards and a touchdown. Bobo caught 4 of 5 targets for 61 yards and a touchdown. And Tyler Lockett caught 4 of 5 for 38. Zach, how do you break down this Seattle Seahawks offense with DK and without DK?
So, I mean, it's pretty clear that they're still playing 3 wide receiver sets, no matter what. No matter who's in the lineup, it's always going to be probably 3 wide receivers. That's just kind of the Pete Carroll way, and that's how the Seahawks offense really rolls. I think looking at the game without DK, Bobo just slotted in, and then JSN got an increased role. So did Tyler Lockett. I think that's just expected throughout the game, Brett. I think when they do have DK, obviously Bobo, you're gonna downgrade him, and he's probably not. Maybe he gets a target or 2, but that's about it. I think the biggest thing for Jake Bobo is probably just dynasty leagues. Pick him up. Like, why not stash him on your bench? Because obviously there's talks about Lockett. Maybe at the end of the year, he's gone. This team is, as long as Geno Smith's probably their quarterback, they're probably playing 3 wide receiver sets. So he's going to get targets, Bobo, next year if Lockett's not there. I think that's a big standout for me. But as for DK Metcalf owners kind of knew. So like it really wasn't unexpected that he was going to be out for this one. But obviously it hurts people's lineups. And of course, him getting ruled out on Sunday definitely hurt fantasy owners. But I feel like he's definitely going to be back this week, back to normal, and you're putting him in your lineup. Of course, it was just a little bit too late for him to get back in the lineup after his hip injury the week before.
So what's pretty interesting is, and I just pulled the stat here, the only time that any Seahawks players got 10 targets or more came in week 2. It was Tyler Lockett. So this is a team that has been spreading the ball pretty much every single week. So, yeah, I mean, listen, DK, he's gotten his touchdowns, and so that's where a lot of his fantasy points have come from. But they like to spread the ball. So I think that picking up any of these guys might end up being a useful thing. Listen, Jackson Smith-Njigba, he's out there in 40% of leagues right now. I mean, he's a potential guy to go out and grab. Just stash him on the end of your bench there. He had a lot of hype, obviously, in the preseason, and then a lot of people dropped him when he didn't exactly come to fruition early in the season. But I mean, listen, this is the guy who can get himself going, and all of a sudden, like, you're talking about one of the top options in fantasy. And so that was the hype he got coming into the season. So that's a guy I would go out and look at. Yes, obviously, Jake Bobo from a dynasty perspective, a good guy to go out and add, because you never know what happens in dynasty. You get those Puka Nakuas at the end of your rookie draft, and they turn out to be one of the top options. And so, I was talking earlier today with one of the leaders in our league in dynasty, and just how you kind of have to just take lottery tickets of young players, and one of them goes off and you're golden. And it's about trying to get as many different lottery tickets as you can to build that younger core. And so I think a guy like Bobo, a guy like Smith-Njigba, those are guys that you want. And from the redraft perspective, obviously, one of them pops, then you're sitting on a really good receiver heading down the stretch run.
Yeah, I mean, take a chance on a guy. Like, take a chance, and probably there's a lot of times where it will end up paying off for you. More times than not, it's going to be just another guy, and you're throwing back him on the waiver wire. But there's the special ones like Puka Nakua and maybe Jake Bobo in the future, where it can really help you out and be unexpectedly one of the top guys in your lineup.
Just want to quickly jump to other quick Justin Jefferson update. As Kevin O'Connell, Jefferson's halfway through his 4-week minimum stay on the IR. Kevin O'Connell comes up just now at the press conference saying the process just needs to play out, and we need to make sure Justin feels ready to go when that time comes. We will see when it is, and I hope to get him back as soon as possible. Zach, we're going to get to Jordan Addison in just a second here, but I mean, pretty good news from a Jefferson perspective. And listen, they're winning games, and so there's the percentage chance going up, I think, on Jefferson coming back this season.
Yeah, Brett, we talked a couple of weeks ago, and we were a little bit worried just based on the Vikings record, not where they wanted it to be. They were really, really struggling, and we were coming up with reasons why Justin Jefferson just shouldn't come back because they're so bad, and obviously the contract situation, like all of those things came into play. But if they now, as they're rolling, you're definitely gonna want Justin Jefferson back if you're the Vikings, and that helps fantasy owners as well. Good news for Jefferson owners that he's pretty close to coming back. Obviously, not a huge timeline just yet, but I mean, to get him back, of course, he's one of the best in the game and one of the best in fantasy football.
Yeah, I think it's the tale of the overreaction Monday thing. Aaron Rodgers actually made a great point yesterday on the Pat McAfee show about it. How you're talking about New England, for example, that Mac Jones is the problem. He's the problem. He's the problem. They need to get rid of him. And then all of a sudden he beats the Bills, and it's like he was never the problem. And that's kind of what you're seeing around the league. And it's no different in Minnesota. We were talking about Kirk Cousins getting traded. We were talking about Justin Jefferson being shut down for the year. They're going to go out and they're going to draft Caleb Williams. All of the different options came out, and they're kind of just silencing everybody with these wins. And so now, listen, there's a chance Jefferson comes back. They make a run, and we're talking about a completely different story than we had just a few weeks ago. And so, but great news there, at least for Jefferson owners, that he could potentially be there coming down the pike. And again, he's still, I understand he's Justin Jefferson. He's still a buy low, though, for me, just based on the fact that he's out right now. And so there's a lot of those teams that had Jefferson that are struggling. And so go check on your Jefferson owner, see how they're doing, and see if there's a potential opportunity there.
Yeah, definitely, Brett.
All right, so jumping right next to our next injury here, Deebo Samuel. He was declared out for Week 7 by Kyle Shanahan due to a hairline fracture of his shoulder and was immediately ruled out for Week 8. So he will not be playing, and San Francisco heads into a bye week next week. So is that going to be Brandon Ayuk or Jawan Jennings? Like, what are we thinking here from the passing options? Obviously, you got Christian McCaffrey there out of the backfield.
Yeah, so I think right now, Brett, obviously Jawan Jennings is going to get a boost, and we saw that it was 2 days ago on Monday Night Football. Jawan Jennings, 5 receptions on 9 targets, 54 yards. That's pretty perfect for a guy who's just stepping in, and he's automatically the wide receiver 2 right now with Deebo out. Of course, the one thing about the Niners offense, you look and there's just so many options, so many mouths to feed, but even so, for Jennings to just come in and it's like any other game, he really stepped up, put up really solid numbers. Obviously, the target share is huge. I think he's a guy to look at on the waiver wire, definitely, if people haven't picked him up already. I think right now this Niners offense just has not gone through Deebo. They've gone a ton of different ways and mainly through Christian McCaffrey. But it's been Brandon Ayuk as well as the top wide receiver in this offense, and Deebo's just gotten just the wrong end of the stick. It like really is hard to see for Deebo fantasy owners. But Brett, you and I kind of expected it at the start of the year. We're like, how is he ranked this high? He's coming off a year where we barely saw him because of both injuries and because McCaffrey just takes a ton of that rushing value away from him.
Yeah, and it's pretty interesting now, just coming down the last hour and a half, Brock Purdy is placed in concussion protocol. And so, Zach, I mean, just from the perspective of that, seems that according to Adam Schefter, he's unlikely to play this weekend. And so that would mean Sam Darnold would have to go as the starter, which is not that much of a drop-off. I think it could actually be a positive thing, especially with Darnold, with he uses his legs. I think that you'll see a lot of work from McCaffrey. If you think back to Darnold and what his career has been like, listen, he played in Carolina with McCaffrey, and there was a lot of dump offs. And so I think that you'll see a lot of that if he does play. Listen, Kyle Shanahan did come out at his press conference and in the same breath also said that there is enough time that Purdy could potentially play this weekend, and it was too soon to declare him out, that there is time for him to be able to clear the concussion protocol. But yeah, I mean, Brandon Ayuk, and the reason is his separation is just unreal this year. He's been getting down the field quickly and separating himself from the defender. And so there's been a ton of like, not only short yardage, but those deep bombs have been going to Ayuk. And I don't know what to think of the Deebo situation other than, he wasn't really high on my radar this year. I didn't really expect him to be that much because I really thought they were going to lean more into McCaffrey. We're seeing that. But obviously in the passing game now, it's kind of been Brandon Ayuk's show. Caught 5-6 targets for 57 yards. He's probably right now, I would say, wide receiver 2. Obviously, it depends on the quarterback situation of what's going on, and we'll monitor, but I'm not sure the value changes that much if it's Darnold versus Purdy.
Yeah, I agree with you. Tough matchup this week, too, for the Niners. We'll get to that a bit later, but they're going up against a tough defense. So maybe a couple downgrades. Maybe Jennings, if you're picking him up, you may not be starting him right away.
I was going to say, Juan Jennings, listen, he had 9 targets last week for 54 yards, 5 catches. And so he's a sneaky flex play in one of those deeper leagues. And yes, again, this is one of those non-bye weeks. And so unless you're dealing with injury, you should be able to stash him just for the option of having him on your bench. Not really looking at doing it, but it is a sneaky flex play potentially.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, so now we go into our standouts. And Zach, we got to start with D'Onta Foreman. He rushed for 89 yards, 6 carries, 2 touchdowns as the Bears take a 30-12 win over the Raiders. He also caught 3 of 5 targets for 31 yards and a touchdown through the air. Zach, this was a performance for the ages from D'Onta Foreman. And I mean, obviously Herbert was up. And then Roschon Johnson, we got to see what's going on now with Roschon and him coming back this week. But I mean, just break what D'Onta Foreman did this week.
It was a perfect matchup. Like, it really was. He just stepped up massively and really, really took advantage of the matchup. He was unbelievable in this one. You mentioned the stats. Also, the targets that he got out of the backfield were huge with a backup quarterback that he's playing with. So that all stands out. I did think going into this game, of course, I picked Roschon Johnson for a big one. Didn't end up playing, but D'Onta Foreman got the perfect matchup, and you knew that with the backup quarterback, they'd be really focused on the run, and they really got him going. It was a huge game for D'Onta. I still have the question mark if Roschon is coming back, but if Roschon's not coming back, then you probably got to keep going with D'Onta Foreman because he's shown the last 2 games that he can put up really solid numbers and be a running back 1 if they need him to be.
Yeah, I think that as far as the Roschon situation goes, I mean, again, we'll see what happens, but I'm not really too concerned with it. I think that Donovan only rostered on everybody's roster. The fact that he's still out there, again, over 40% of leagues, I don't know how that really happened, but yeah, it was a good matchup. Agree with that. This week they play Chargers, and so I think that he's probably a good flex option, unless obviously Roschon Johnson is playing, in which case I wouldn't start either of them because I think that Roschon would eat into the carries too much.
Yeah, I agree with you. And it definitely is something to look at in the next couple of days if Roschon is going to be healthy and playing this week.
Yep. So now let's jump to our next standout here, Zach. It was an absolutely amazing performance for Jordan Addison. Caught 7 of his 10 targets, 123 yards, 2 touchdowns. They take the win over the Niners. He does it in prime time. He catches a 20-yard touchdown just a couple plays after he had the ball ripped away from him for an interception. Then he goes and he rips the ball away from Jarkevius Ward as vindication on a 60-yarder and takes it down. And so, I mean, Zach, this guy has just been electric. Obviously, Justin Jefferson, he's out, and so the workload's kind of been going to Addison. And so with Kirk Cousins, he has to figure out who his target are. He's always had a favorite target no matter which team he's been on. Not really a guy who loves to spread the ball a ton. But yeah, as far as Addison goes, I mean, listen, I think that when Jefferson does come back, I think Addison is going to have a bigger role than he had when Jefferson was there beginning of the season. He has 29 catches now, Addison, for 400 yards, 6 touchdowns in 7 games. I mean, pretty good.
Yeah, Brett. And the biggest thing that stands out is, it's weird to say, like, I see some similarities between Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison. Obviously, Jefferson, a NFL veteran, and Jordan Addison, a rookie, like, still has a lot to learn. But I feel like Kirk Cousins is just like, oh yeah, all right. It's basically like throwing to Justin Jefferson. I think the size is probably the one difference. I think Jefferson's got a little bit of size on him, but other than that, like, a really solid option, could be the number one if Jefferson wasn't there. Like, they'd had no problem with that. He's shown in the last couple of games, like, he's a really, really solid player. And while Jefferson's out, like, this guy's a real solid high-end wide receiver too. I don't know, like, in that wide receiver 2 range, definitely, because the targets are going to come in this offense. They don't rely on the run a lot. They really rely on Kirk's arm and moving the ball downfield through the air. He's got a ton of options in Hawkinson, KJ Osborne, and Jordan Addison, but he's proven that Addison's going to get those targets while Jefferson's out. Really, really solid option for Kirk.
I think this weekend really proved that Jordan Addison, thus far, has been the number 1 receiver of the rookie class. And I think that it's a pretty big margin right now in between. Yes, you could say Puka Nacua is there, but I think that the workload is a little different with the Puka Nacua than it is for Jordan Addison. I think that the plays that are being made, you could set Jordan Addison right now as the top rookie. Pull up here, Jordan Addison is 5'11", 174. Justin Jefferson, 6'1", 203. So, a little bit of size, but you're completely right. And it's something that stuck out to me this weekend also, which is they're very similar players, the way they play the game and the way that they run their routes. And I don't know if that has to do with the way that Minnesota's coaching him or the way that he's learning from Justin Jefferson. I'm not sure exactly what it is. But he did look eerily similar to Justin Jefferson this past week. And so funny that you said that, because it did pop into my head as well. I think that if you have him right now, he's got to be started in probably a high-end wide receiver 2 spot, if not even a low-end wide receiver 1 if you're in some trouble. I don't know how you don't start him. You have to put him out there. Probably a high-end wide receiver 2. He does go into a nice matchup here with the Packers, which is sure to be a slugfest, as it always is with Vikings and Packers. But yeah, I mean, Addison he proved to me that he's going to be a very good dynasty asset.
Yeah, Brett, and he's just proven time and time again while Jefferson's been out that he could be the number 1 guy. Like I said, he really has a lot of similarities to Justin Jefferson, and I feel like that's why Minnesota really looked at him in draft season. They saw those similarities. They kind of pick maybe not tall, but shorter, faster kind of players at wide receiver, and it really helps them out in the end.
Yeah, and like I just said, I think that when Jefferson comes back, Addison is still going to have a big role. It's almost kind of like, if you want to make a rookie comparison, it's almost like when Puka Nacua was there without Cooper Kupp. And Cooper Kupp came back and everyone was like, oh no, here come the 20 targets to Cooper Kupp. Well, no, they'll throw to him 15 times instead of 20 times. And the other 5 plus 10 will go to Puka Nacua. I think that's the sort of thing we could potentially see with Jordan Addison. He'll still get his double-digit targets, I think, or around double-digit.
Yeah, I agree with you.
So another rookie who made waves this week was Jahmyr Gibbs. And finally, for a lot of these fantasy owners out there, finally, he had a big game. Carried the ball 11 times, 68 yards and a touchdown. Caught 9 of 10 targets, finally, for 58 yards. They did take the loss, but listen, huge output here for Gibbs. Zach, what do you make of this?
So I'm a Gibbs owner in 3 different leagues.
Yeah.
I don't want to be a party pooper, but this game script just completely favored Jahmyr Gibbs. It was the perfect possible game script to get a guy going who is a pretty elusive back out of the backfield. He is a receiving type back. Yes, he can run the ball, but you're really looking for those receptions out of the backfield. And for him to get 10 targets, 9 receptions, that's exactly what you want to see. Brett, this Lions team is way too good to all of a sudden just kind of focus on this for an entire game. Of course, while Montgomery's out, you're clearly starting Jahmyr Gibbs because he's proven that definitely while Montgomery is out, he can have solid numbers, and he could I'd probably put him as a flex option, a low end RB2. Yep. I just think that's his area right now because it really depends on the game for me. He had 11 rushes for 68 yards. He's not doing that every week. He's like, that's some really solid numbers out of the backfield. I'm expecting a little less. I hate to be a party pooper, like I said, but I'm not expecting big games like this every single week.
No, I completely agree. I mean, listen, he's not going to get 10 targets. I don't know that he's going to get that when, Montgomery comes back and because Monty's been getting the snap share. For me, it's pretty interesting. Listen, Gibbs, he set season high marks in total opportunities, targets, routes per dropback, running back touch share. I mean, you have to remember Craig Reynolds, he was hurt coming into this game. And so it didn't really look like Craig Reynolds actually was going to get any work, even though they made it sound like it. As we spoke about last week, like he wasn't a guy that even put it on your radar. We knew it was going to be Jahmyr Gibbs' game. So for me, I think actually a really good opportunity for you to sell really high on Jahmyr Gibbs after what was a really big output to one of those running needy teams in your league. Obviously, redraft we're talking, not dynasty. But as far as it goes, you could sell him as a running back too right now, I think, in these leagues. And so if you're one of those teams that has a bunch of running backs, maybe you want to look out there and say, oh, hey, Jahmyr Gibbs, and use him as your pawn to get a bigger fish.
Yeah, I think that's something to look at, Brett. The one thing I'll say is Gibbs has another really, really good matchup this week. A really good matchup against Vegas. So you might end up getting a ton of points again, and then you could sell for even higher. Like that's something to look at because I do think he's going to get a very hefty workload in this game when it comes to rushing touches. I think that's going to be huge for him. I think they're going to blow the doors off the Raiders. It's in Detroit. So obviously we'll get to that a bit later, but you may hold for this week and maybe sell high on him next week as well.
Completely. And just as far as it goes with the offense, it runs through the running back. I think that has been made very clear. And so if Monty's not there, then it seems that Gibbs is going to get the opportunities. If Monty is there, then it seems that Monty is going to get the bulk of the opportunities. But let's break down now some of these games here as we head into the upcoming week, and we start out in Buffalo tomorrow night as the Buffalo Bills take on the Tampa Bay Bucks. And Zach, I think right now the big news for the Bills is the fact that Dawson Knox is going to be ruled out for this week. No timetable on anything, but it came with a bit of a surprise that he had right wrist surgery and recovering at the moment. Didn't want to stick a timeline on there, Sean McDermott. But it seems that Dalton Kincaid starting to come into his own and be that guy that we expected in the preseason.
Yeah, Brett, he definitely could be. And obviously last week it was a really rough one for Buffalo. They went up and up to Foxborough and lost to New England, a last-second touchdown for the Patriots. And the Bills took their third loss of the season, which is crazy to say as we're heading into week 8. The Bills have 3 losses already, but they're looking to bounce back in this matchup on their home field, going up against Tampa Bay, who's struggled on defense so far this year. I think we're going to see a big game from the heavy hitters in Stephon Diggs out wide. I think Gabe Davis has a chance to really step up in this one as well. Obviously, a boomer bust type of play Gabe Davis has been throughout his career, but I feel like he definitely has come into his own a little bit so far this season. And look out for the tight ends. Yeah, Dalton Kincaid is a really solid option in the fantasy world where we're always looking for a tight end. Like, it's always going to happen. He could have a really, really good matchup this week against the Bucs. It was weird last week for James Cook, 13 carries for 56 yards. So not a ton, and credit to New England's defense that kind of limited him. It's just been not great for James Cook. I don't know what it's been. Maybe Buffalo just being down in games and they kind of have to play catch up a little bit more, and that takes some of the rushing touches away rather than what it was at the start of the season when he was getting a lot of touches and they were up by a ton in games. I think you're still starting those guys, and James Cook, you're probably still putting him maybe as a flex guy right now, but it's definitely hard times. They are going up against a struggling defense, though.
I think what was interesting for me with James Cook was he actually got work in the red zone. And listen, he caught that 8-yard touchdown, and that kind of saved his fantasy day. But he is getting the work. Obviously, Damian Harris had neck injury, that scary neck injury. And Lat Murray didn't really get that much work. He got only 6 touches. And so, it seems that the bulk of the work is going to Cook. Probably a back end running back 2, I would say, very low end. But I'm still putting him in the lineup. I think that just getting the workload and again, that red zone target that turned into the touchdown really changed it for me. Obviously this was an off week for the Bills. I think that they try to right the ship here, playing at home, national TV. And so, yeah, Cook's a good one for me. Obviously, we just talked about Dawson Knox, and so it's all about Kincaid. Listen, the tight end position, except for the top few guys, it's very touchdown dependent, touchdown or bust. Kincaid had 8 targets, 8 catches on 8 targets, 75 yards. Yeah, he didn't score a touchdown, but it didn't matter. In PPR, that is king. Tight end premium, that is king. And so I would say he's probably a top 10 play just based on the fact that he's the number 2 option right now in the offense. Gabe Davis, he's probably a low-end flex. Didn't get as much work. Only caught 1 of his 5 targets for 6 yards. And so, he probably have better options out there. Obviously, Gabe Davis, we talked about it in relation to Mike Williams. And, it's those weeks where he gets cold. And the reason that you have him is because there's those weeks where he goes off for 25 points. It's just about figuring out which weeks those are. So he's probably low end. You probably have better options, though, in your lineup. And then obviously you're playing the regulars, Allen, Diggs, etc. As far as it goes and probably also the defense, just based on the fact that, they're going to try to wreak some havoc. Obviously they're a bit depleted right now, but they're still the Bills defense. So as far as we go with Tampa Bay, though, Baker, listen, he's probably a back end super option just based on the fact that the Bills are a depleted defense. And so there is the chance that he can have a solid game. White, it was not so pretty for Rachaad White. 13 carries, only at 34 yards. Did get 6 catches, though. It was great for 65 yards, but the carries were not amazing. Probably also, just like James Cook, a low-end running back, too. And you're starting, no question about it. Godwin's probably, listen, he got 12 targets last week. Didn't really do much with it. Probably a wide receiver 3 flex. And that's probably it. I don't know that I'm starting K-Dot.
Yeah, I agree with you, Brett. And just looking at the Bucs, it's clearly Godwin and Evans. That's just what you're looking at. Of course, Godwin was questionable, but was a full participant today in practice, so he's going to play tomorrow. Same with Baker, was limited yesterday, and then he ended up getting a full practice in today. So they're playing. I think they can take some chances against this Bills defense. The Bills have struggled defensively, and I don't think teams should be afraid of this Bills defense right now, just based on there's not a lot of healthy guys back there for Buffalo. I think they can take some shots. And of course, Mike Evans and Chris Godwin can definitely take some chances against the Bills and could be a really solid fantasy week for them in the end, Brett.
Yeah, I mean, not too much to this one. But let's just jump right to the next one. I mean, this should be another one that's pretty interesting. Miami versus New England, and New England coming with this huge win now versus Buffalo. Miami has just been rolling pretty much the whole year. Just quickly before we get into the game preview, I want to break down the quarterback situation and the neck breathing of Malik Cunningham and Bailey Zappi to Mac Jones. And Mac Jones basically silences all of the haters last week. And as a result, they go out and they waive Malik Cunningham, which that was the most interesting move of the last week in terms of a roster move to me. Just based on the fact that I don't really understand NFL contracts and how any of them work. They signed him to a 3-year deal. Don't know how much money was guaranteed on anything. You would assume he got a signing bonus based off of that. They say how much they worked with him in different packages, and they're going to run some packages. He only played 6 snaps 2 weeks ago. Then he doesn't even dress this past week, and then they waive him. So I'm not sure what changed at all. They made it like he's going to be next to Lamar Jackson, and then they waived him. He did clear waivers. He's now on the practice squad for New England. But, signing into a 3-year deal, and causing havoc for your first-round quarterback is a little testy. I was a bit confused by the whole situation there. Not really sure. As far as it goes, though, this week, I'm keeping Mac on the bench. I think that it was a great performance. I don't know that you're going to get that every single time, especially just based on when you compare it to the rest of the quarterbacks. He was okay. Like, he wasn't an amazing fantasy quarterback. He was good for what he is. He had a good game, a good NFL game, I should say. So I'm keeping him on the bench right now. Probably have better options in 1 quarterback and 2 quarterback leagues. Say that Board should at least be on rosters, though. Listen, he's been getting target after target game. This past game, he got 7 targets, 6 catches, 63 yards, and a touchdown. Probably not starting him, but he should at least be on rosters. Ramondre, listen, he rushed 9 times, 34 yards, caught 6 targets for 51 yards. He's a flex play. I think he's worked himself back into the flex. It was a guy that a lot of people were mentioning. I don't agree with that. I think that he at least should be in the flex because I think they're starting to work back into it. He was going up against a pretty tough defensive front in Buffalo. Zach, what do you think of the Patriots here?
So, I mean, I agree with basically everything you said. I think looking at the Patriots right now, it's clearly Stevenson and Bourne as, I would say, flex plays. I think Bourne is in that flex consideration just based on we've seen week after week after week that he's getting those targets. Why not take a shot on him as a flex? I think there could be better options on your roster. And I'm not saying start Kendrick Bourne ahead of them, but if you're in a bind, you need, of course, it's there's no buys this week, but injuries pop up. And if you're dealing with an injury problem and you have Kendrick Bourne there, and slot him into your flex because he's going to put up some points. They've targeted him time and time again. I think Miami's going to be up in this game. Definitely. They're looking to bounce back after a loss to Philly. So I do think that New England probably going to end up playing catch up in this game. So start a guy like Kendrick Bourne, and maybe garbage time will help you out as well. Just really keep throwing the ball and trusting Mac Jones. So I think that's the biggest thing. I talked about it quickly on my radio show, Brett, this week. I think the biggest thing for Mac right now is he's the top quarterback. There's no other player in New England that you can tell me is a better quarterback than Mac Jones. Talent-wise, he's clearly there. Of course, he hasn't shown it, but as a 2-5 team, I don't think going to a younger and maybe just a worse quarterback is going to help you. I think staying with Mac Jones is the best move, clearly, for New England right now.
And shout out to the owner in our league who just picked up Dalton Kincaid, clearly listening to us. After a good one. Okay, so now just quickly, I mean, there's nothing to put down on the Miami front. Tua, Waddle, Tyreek, Mostert, start them all. Jeff Wilson, stash them.
Yeah, well, Tyreek is actually questionable right now because he did not practice today. He might, there's been a report from Schefter that he might end up being out for this one. You got to make plans early for that. I think that I'm a Tyreek owner and I kind of already have options. You maybe try and find something for a week. Just some news that popped out today that he missed practice and is probably questionable for Sunday's game. Excuse me, bro.
There you go. So yeah, definitely keep an eye on that. And obviously you do have until Sunday. And so if you have a guy on Buffalo, you have a guy in Tampa, then it might become a different story when you got your Sunday or your Thursday night games. But there is no London game. So all the games, the bulk of the games actually will be at 1 p.m. Only a couple of 4 p.m.s coming this week. And so, yeah, but definitely keep an eye on that and stay tuned to the latest social media platforms as we navigate the next couple of days. Tyreek Hill. Good point there.
Yep. 100%.
So now we go and we head to New Jersey for the two teams that are not named New Jersey. The battle for New York, New Jersey, the Jets and the Giants. The Giants will serve as the home team. And Zach, they might have quarterback back, but if not, it seems that it's going to be Tyrod.
Yeah, and I feel like they're fine with that because like he's been all right. Like he's filled in pretty solid for them so far while Daniel Jones is out. I think right now in this matchup against the Jets, it's not going to be an easy one. This Jets defense is very, very tough. And as well as for the Jets, like the Giants defense has really stepped up the last couple of weeks. They've been solid as well. So it's not going to be easy for really either one of these teams to move up the field. I think I looked at the total for this game. It's maybe the lowest of week 8. It's not even close. Just a very low total. Probably going to rely on a lot of defense in this one. For the Giants, Brett, I think it's Saquon, and depending on how you're feeling on Darren Waller, that's probably it. And I think when you look at the Jets, you're going with Breece Hall. You're probably going with Garrett Wilson. And anything after that, I don't know. That's kind of just based on what you're seeing. I think no bye weeks definitely just proves the point that you got to just rely on your top guys right now.
Yeah, completely. I mean, as far as the Daniel Jones thing goes, Daboll said today, head coach Brian Daboll said that he did practice today, but it was in a limited fashion. Has not been cleared for contact, and his workload won't increase today from what it's been in the last week. And so probably have to monitor that over the next 2 days. Even so, though, I'm starting Darren Waller. He finally got it going. 7 catches, 8 targets, 98 yards, and a touchdown. I think that whether it's Daniel Jones, who loves Darren Waller, or it's Tyrod Taylor, who figured out, hey, Darren Waller is going to catch the ball every time I throw it to him. Yeah, I think that becomes one of the starts just based on the position. And if you pick Darren Waller, you probably don't have that much of a deep option as your second there. And then so Darren Waller, feel free to start him. I'm very comfortable starting him this week. Saquon, listen, he finally had over 20 carries. I think that's a big takeaway from the last week with the Giants. Saquon had 21 carries for 77 yards. Did get into the passing game as well, caught a touchdown, so that was nice. I think he's back in running back 1 territory, and there's no issue with there. As far as the Jets go, coming off the bye week, beat the Eagles, obviously, so they're running high on emotion. Breece Hall, listen, he rushed for 39 yards and a touchdown on 12 carries, 54 yards on 5 receptions. I think he's worked his way back into running back 1 territory. Dalvin Cook, only 12 yards on 3 carries and caught a pass for 2 yards. Dropping. I think he's the drop candidate now officially. There was a bit of it lurking in the last week or so, or 2 weeks. I think you could drop him. I'm very comfortable dropping Dalvin. There's a lot of ruling going around about the next week with the trade deadline and what that looks like and whether they trade him or not. If they trade him, then Breece Hall is a running back 1 for the rest of the year. I think plain and simple, because there's not going to be anybody. I don't see Michael Carter coming in, Izzy Abanikanda coming in and taking any sort of workload from him. Keep an eye on Dalvin of where he potentially could land if he does get traded, just based on where he's going to be thrown in a side of a different fantasy running back. As far as it goes with the quarterback situation, Zach Wilson, he's a superflex candidate. Listen, he played good against the Eagles. It's a guy who uses his legs. This is a really good matchup for him, as we've watched Giants torched quite a few times this year. The secondary is not that good. And it seems that Zach Wilson's actually becoming more comfortable throwing the ball downfield as he did against the Eagles defense. I think this could be another good performance for him. And so he is a candidate for superflex option. Garrett Wilson, I think he's back. I think Garrett Wilson is back. 12 targets, caught 8 of them for 90 yards. Still hasn't found the end zone since week 2. That doesn't matter. I think the volume will lead him into the end zone. Right now, he's a low-end wide receiver 2 with the potential that he become low-end wide receiver 1 this week based on the matchup. But yeah, I mean, this Jets team is completely different than what we thought heading into week 1.
Yeah, I agree with you, Brett. And like you said, just keep the hope up on Garrett Wilson. And of course, I think there's no running back behind Breece Hall right now. It's his backfield, and everybody else is just going to get a couple carries here and there. But it's the Breece show now. And for the rest of the season, he's definitely in RB1 range. I agree with you.
Yep. So now let's jump right to the next matchup. It is Jacksonville as they head into Pittsburgh to take on the Steelers. And Zach, I think that the big storyline for me here from the Jacksonville standpoint is that Calvin Ridley really hasn't gotten his target share. I'm not sure how you can be comfortable putting him in to any fantasy football lineup.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think this week kind of shows that it may just be one of those weeks again. I think Pittsburgh is going to come into this matchup and they're going to focus on the top guy, and that's Calvin Ridley. Like, they're going to focus on him and work their game plan around him in the secondary. They did it last week, and they pretty much shut down or limited Cooper Kupp. Only had 2 receptions last week for 29 yards and on 7 targets. Credit to the Pittsburgh defense. Puka Nacua did go off. I don't know why, like, I can't say Christian Kirk can go off again in this game. Like, he's done it the last couple of weeks, had a really, really good performance last week down in New Orleans, grabbed the late touchdown as well, Christian Kirk. You got to keep starting Christian Kirk right now while he's on this run. And Ridley, I don't know how I could say you can bench him, but I know people are going to be benching him because he just has not been good enough. And you probably have to just wait and see what you're going to get from him on a weekly basis. He has not shown enough so far, and you're probably going to wait until he proves something. The other guy who's been really solid is Travis Etienne. Like, really, really good stuff the last 3 weeks. And of course, you're going to keep putting him in your lineup. Like, he's trending into RB1 range, Brett. Like, really, really solid option that you can go to an ETN, and he's getting the workload. He's getting the touches out of the backfield as well as in the receiving game. A really big start, I think, for him. And then the last guy I'd say is Evan Ingram. He continues to get targets, and you're in a fantasy football where we're always looking for tight ends. Evan Ingram's one of the guys that you're definitely going to rely on.
Yeah, definitely one of those more reliable guys than he has been for pretty much his whole career. Playing him, playing Lawrence, the Ridley thing's interesting. There's been weeks he's gotten 7 catches and 8 catches. He had, triple digits, over 100 yards receiving. And then the rest has just been like 1 catch, 2 catch. And so to me, I'm really scared about him. I would need to see more. You probably have some better receiving options, I would guess, if you're still in contention. So I'm going with those options right now. I need to see more before I put him in and then risk getting like a 4-point day out of him or even less. And so, he's a low flex option. I would put him at, but probably benching him. As far as Kirk goes, listen, Kirk has been awesome. Back-to-back weeks with a touchdown, receiver 2, pretty solid option. Don't really fret about him. ETN, 53 yards on 14 carries, 2 touchdowns, and caught 3 of 5 targets for 24 yards. He's becoming a running back 1. Plain and simple. He has been the top option, I think, on the entire team for them. And he's not even a question. You're putting him in your lineup. As far as it goes on the other side of the ball, though, I think it's a little different of a story for Najee Harris than it was a week ago, just based on the fact that I think Najee outplayed Jalen Warren. And so, the last couple of weeks it's been back and forth, and Najee carried the ball 14 times, 53 yards, got his first touchdown of the season. It was against the Rams, which I think is a notable thing with that defensive front. He outcarried Jalen Warren 14-6. And so I would say Najee probably is in flex territory. Warren's probably right now, though, a stash on your bench at least. As far as George Pickens goes, 5 of 8 targets, 107 yards, 2 games in a row over 100 yards. Deontay Johnson, 5 of 6 targets for 79 yards. He's the flex option. You're putting George Pickens in, obviously. And obviously there's the injury to Pat Freiermuth, and so I think that there's going to be an increase here in the workload for both of those guys.
Yeah, I agree with you, Brett. And you mentioned Deontay Johnson, a really solid week in the first week back for him. So you're probably trending him back towards where you're hoping that he trends back towards where you drafted him as probably a low-end wide receiver 2. I think that's just a perfect spot for him. He's not there yet, but as the volume continues to increase, I think it'll increase even more in this game. You're definitely going to see what you drafted in Deontay Johnson.
Yeah, completely. And now we head into this next game with some big question marks. And the biggest question mark as we head to Atlanta versus Tennessee is who is playing quarterback for the Tennessee Titans? And it seems to be the question that has been ranging for the last 24 to 48 hours of, is it going to be Ryan Tannehill? Okay, it's not going to be Ryan Tannehill. Who is it going to be then? Is it Malik Willis or is it Will Levis? And came out early this morning from Pro Football Talk. It's going to be Will Levis. Head coach Mike Vrabel comes out and says, whoa, not so fast, my friend, pulls his Lee Corso. And now we're kind of unsure. And Zach, so what do you make here of Tennessee based on who the quarterback is if it's not Ryan Tannehill?
So as I'm just going to go off DeAndre Hopkins because that's who I'm really focusing on right now in my lineup specifically. I have him on the bench right now. I think I have better options ahead of him. I would be okay with just benching him for a week. I think that could be smart. But if you're in a bind, I think the one thing when you look at the quarterbacks, if Levis is playing, I'm starting Hopkins. If Malik Willis is playing, I'm not starting Hopkins. That's all you got to really look at. I think Levis has proven that he can throw the ball around and sling it around to his wide receivers. Malik Willis in his 3 or 4 NFL games so far in his career has not proven that to me. I think it's just a lot of the run game and focusing on slamming it down the opponent's throat. I think that's just going to be Derrick Henry if Malik Willis is in the lineup and even Malik Willis rushing out of the backfield. But I don't think there's a lot of value in the passing game for Tennessee with Willis at quarterback. But like I said, if Levis is playing, I think Hopkins is probably a flex option at best.
So for me, I think that D-Hop just hasn't been great in general. Obviously, they're coming off a bye week, but didn't really do anything the week before. Only had 1 catch for 20 yards, and so it wasn't that great. He really has been a big disappointment for fantasy owners. And for me, he's probably at best a flex option with the quarterback change. However, again, like you just said, there's no bye weeks this week, and so you probably have some better options. Interesting note, though, from Mike Clay of ESPN, Atlanta has the fewest fantasy points allowed to receivers and the second least to A.J. Terrell's side of the field. And so I think it would be a tough matchup for him anyway. And so I'm sticking elsewhere. I think he's going to stay on my bench. As far as Levis goes, I think he's going to end up being the starter. And Vrabel's just sort of protecting his quarterback by not coming out and saying, hey, he's the guy. I think Malik Willis has just proven that when he gets in the game, I think back to that primetime game against Buffalo from last season where they just got absolutely smacked. He was running for his life the whole game. He couldn't get anything off. They gave him no time to hold the ball. And yeah, it was just kind of running around. Controlled chaos is what I would call it. And that's sort of his style. He likes that helter-skelter kind of style, but it can only be done in moderation. And so I don't know that this is the matchup that I would want that. I would want that pocket passer. Levis has been able to sling it. And so I think that as far as it goes with deep leagues and super flex leagues, it is a potential guy I would go out and stash. We don't know how bad this injury is. The trade deadline is coming up, and so we don't know the future of Ryan Tannehill. Obviously, if he's injured, he's not good. But, you never really know what's going to happen in the next couple of days, especially when a team like Tennessee's trading out their top defensive players. And, I'm very unsure of what the future will be like in Tennessee, even in a week from now. I really also think that there's some smoke here. There's a lot of smoke around Derrick Henry. I think that this could be a big game for showcasing him to try to get a team to go bite a pretty large price on Derrick Henry. So I think this could be a heavy Derrick Henry game.
Yeah, definitely, Brett. Something to look at in the next couple of days, and as we look forward to this game, who's going to end up playing quarterback for Tennessee? Yeah,
completely. And as far as it goes with Atlanta, the guy playing quarterback should not be the quarterback. We've been pretty clear about that. You could do better than Desmond Ridder in your fantasy lineup, the same way that Arthur Smith can do better than Desmond Ridder as his quarterback. Bijan, though, back to normal. Playing up as regular. Algier is going back to the bench. Very low end flex option, obviously, but probably not going to get that heavy. Would say more so in like our dynasty league where you have him and you play him as a deeper flex. That's probably where he belongs. Those to be in lineups. Drake London, he caught 6 of 7 targets, 54 yards. Was against the Bucs, and so it was a stingy matchup. We were concerned a little bit last week. He actually was pretty okay. London probably a flex option, and then Pitts was. I'd say that he's probably a lower end tight end 1, high end tight end 2, depending on your tight end premiums. But he's probably a fringe starter, depending on who else you have in your roster. Yeah,
if you're like me and have Sam Laporta, you're probably not starting Kyle Pitts. I think that's just I wouldn't even I feel like you even have better options at flex as well. So you're probably not even in putting him there. If you got a guy, then you're definitely not starting Kyle Pitts. I think it's going to be a good matchup for him though in the secondary so far. So that's something to look out for. And Drake London, you brought him up, been consistent the last couple of weeks, and that's really all you can ask for from an Atlanta wideout. And Drake London's been really good so far. You're going to keep putting him in your lineup as long as he's consistent in this offense.
Completely. I don't think there's dispute over this team. So let's just move right on to the next one. We have Houston at Carolina. Zach, this is matchup that people just from an NFL perspective are looking at, just to look at CJ Stroud go head to head with Bryce Young. Just as far as it goes with Bryce Young, he did have a pretty good performance a few weeks ago against Detroit. Not as good against Miami this past week. You're probably putting him on your bench unless it's a deeper super flex league, dynasty league. And you have to put him in at that super flex spot. But Houston's defense has been really good. And so could be a tough matchup for them. I'm really kind of looking at them to put the full court press in on Adam Thielen to maybe knock him down. However, if you have Adam Thielen, you're starting it because this dude's just been an absolute monster the last couple of weeks. I think every single game except for week 1, he has scored double digits. And I think except for 2, he scored over 20 points in standard PPR leagues. He's just been a monster. You're starting. Let's see if if this tough Houston defense can contain Adam Thielen. Chuba Hubbard, he actually had a pretty good game. He had 19 carries, 88 yards, and a touchdown, added in a bunch of leagues. But it seems like starter Myers might end up coming back this week. And so I would stash Chuba just for the sake of stashing him. And we don't know what the work is going to be like now after watching Chuba Hubbard go off a couple weeks ago. Miles Sanders, though, he's probably a risky play just based on that. He hasn't really been amazing the last couple weeks, and so you're probably stashing him there on your bench. And that's probably as far as I would go here as far as it goes with Carolina.
Yeah, Brett, I agree with you. Of course, you have to start Adam Thielen. I have Thielen on 4 or 5 different teams. He's in every single lineup over guys that I would say at the start of the year, yeah, I'm probably putting him in my lineup. Christian Watson, Deontay Johnson, like I'm starting Adam Thielen. He's going in over those guys. I think that's a really big target right now in fantasy football, and you just got to keep riding with him. Even though it's a tough matchup, they're still going to be trying to get him the ball. I think Houston might end up being up in this game, Brett. I think they're the better team right now on paper. And maybe even so they've proven it so far this season. They're probably going to be up in this game. And I feel like that's more targets for Adam Thielen in the end. Of course, you mentioned Miles Sanders. Question if he's going to play. If he does play, will his role be limited? Chuba Hubbard is a solid option, but you did mention Houston's defense is really, really tough. So I think you may end up staying away. Just depends on what's going on in your lineup. To no bye weeks, still a lot of options out there. I think when you look at Houston, Stroud's definitely a super flex start. Like he's really rock solid right now. He has been so far this season. Of course, you're probably putting Dameon Pierce in your lineup. And I think when it comes to the wide receivers, it's Nico Collins, maybe. He's fallen into the boomer bust category for me, Brett. I don't know. It kind of just depends who you have. And I feel like if you put Nico Collins in your lineup, you can expect to be disappointed. Like you're okay with it because it's just I have no clue what he's going to do each week, Brett. It is a good matchup against Carolina, but it's still a question mark for me right now.
I'm going to start actually with the tight end position in Dalton Schultz. I think that the first 3 weeks of the season, he was pretty much invisible. And ever since then, he's been scoring double digits. He has a touchdown in the last 3 games. And so to me, he's one of those back end ones that unless you have that Sam Laporta, if you have one of those disappointing guys, if you have a Pat Freiermuth, he's a pretty easy person to go put in your lineup and feel like, hey, this guy might actually score a touchdown this week. And I would be more confident that he would score a touchdown than a lot of the tight ends that are in the league right now coming into this matchup, just based on the fact that he has that chemistry right now going with CJ Stroud. And so Dalton Schultz right now, a back-end tight end one, I would say. As far as it goes with the running back room, Singletary and Pierce, a big takeaway for me. 13 for 34 for Pierce, 12 carries for 58 for Singletary. It's sort of this split, and you kind of have to feel a little iffy right now if you're a Dameon Pierce owner. He's scaring me away this week. I'm going to right now probably put him on my bench, I would say, just because I'm scared of Singletary potentially eating into that workload. We thought that it was going to be a little bit. We didn't think it was going to be that much when we talked about him in the preseason. Yeah, it just kind of was a 50-50 split. And so I'm curious if that continues down the stretch here or if it goes back to just Pierce being the full workload back. So interesting. Stroud, though, he has a really good floor. I think that that's what has been figured out here. And so he is a solid super flex option each and every week, I think. He hasn't actually finished, though, in the top 10 in any of the weeks in the season. He actually finished as quarterback number 10 in week 4, but hasn't finished inside the top 10 in any other week. So, but yeah, he's a solid super flex option. And then, yeah, like you said about Nico Collins, kind of interesting because, again, it's one of those you never know what you're going to get. He's kind of playing with house money right now, but that said, I probably have to put him in, I would say, as a low-end wide receiver 2 into a flex play. You are probably playing him if you have him based on the fact that he has popped in the last couple of weeks. Carolina isn't exactly a scary matchup, and so, yeah, you're probably playing him.
Yep, agreed, Brett.
All right, so now let's jump in to a matchup of some big markets here. It is the LA Rams taking on the Dallas Cowboys. Dallas, they're coming off a bye, and Zach, I think it could have been much needed for a guy like Tony Pollard, who was okay from the rushing.
Yeah, I think he needed a week or two to really think about it. And I think Dallas needed a week or two to really think about how they can fix their red zone problem. They stink in the red zone. They just cannot figure it out. And a bye week could have definitely helped that out. They need to figure out ways to get the ball in the end zone. They settled for a ton of field goals in the last couple of games and so far this season. And it's hurt some of the values of those Dallas players. So hopefully Pollard has figured that out, and Mike McCarthy's figured out ways to in the red zone to put the ball in the end zone. I think the biggest thing right now is for Dallas is CeeDee Lamb and Tony Pollard. Those two guys are really rock solid. You're always going to be starting them no matter the matchup. Those guys I'm expecting them to step up coming off the bye week. They're at home. It's not a primetime game. It's a 1:00 game, Brett, for the Dallas Cowboys. We don't see those too often, especially in Dallas. So I think that the biggest thing right now is the Steelers kind of took advantage of that Rams defense last week. And I think Dallas is looking at that tape and says, okay, well, we could maybe do the same. Jake Ferguson is the other guy I'd probably put on the radar just because he's gotten those targets. He did not, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, he had a really bad game, but Dak has proven consistently that he's one of his go-to targets, Jake Ferguson, and you should definitely be looking at him at tight end.
Yeah, it was a one catch, 15 yard, and so on one target. I think it's a throwaway game, and I think it was a throwaway game for a lot of the Cowboys. That actually starts with Mike Gallup, a guy who I actually put a couple of years ago on my do not ever draft again list, just based on the fact that he has trouble catching the ball. He had 10 targets, only caught 3 of them for 24 yards, no touchdown. Was added in a lot of leagues just based on the target share, but he scares me. And so, yeah, I'm staying away from him. I don't even want him on my team. He's available in like 70% of leagues. Someone's going to have him. As far as it goes with Pollard and with CeeDee Lamb, I think you're correct in that they are matchup proof. You're starting them every single week. Pollard was like I said, he rushed 15 times for 30 yards, but he was good through the air. 6 to 7 targets for 80 a couple weeks ago. So I think that was okay. Dak coming off a really good performance actually in Los Angeles. He was going against the Chargers, though, not the Rams. So I think that you have to at least look at the potential of starting Dak Prescott coming off of a good game. Obviously, again, depends on your roster and all of that. But, if you have a guy like a Brock Purdy right now, you're monitoring that. As far as it goes, though, with the Rams, I mean, you're starting the regular guys. Puka, he's in. Cooper Kupp, he's in. As far as it goes with Matt Stafford, lower end, starter, but probably more so on a super flex angle. Hasn't really proven to be all that special this year. But he's got a floor. I think that's what it really comes down to for Matt Stafford. High floor, low ceiling. We've seen that consistency pretty much every single week. So it is a potential option. Listen, he's out there on waivers a lot. And so you're in a bind. Like it is a guy that you could potentially go out and get. Just if you need a guy with a high floor, you need that consistency. So that is possible. Tutu Atwell, I think that was, to me, the biggest disappointment of this entire Rams offense, just based on the fact that he's so electric that first bunch of weeks when Cooper Kupp came, and then all of a sudden he kind of disappeared. Listen, he caught a touchdown last week, and that's all well. It was his only catch of the day, and it was for 31 yards. And so that was where he got his entire fantasy points. And so, he's become a drop candidate. I don't know that you can really keep a guy like Tutu Atwell on your team until he proves otherwise. And then, you got Kyron Williams on IR, and so the running back situation is a little murky for me.
Yeah, I agree with you, Brett. I think I'd put Darrell Henderson just on the flex radar. I probably wouldn't be starting him just because of the matchup. It's going to be a tough one against Dallas, but he got the load of carries last week for LA, 18 carries for 61 yards. The one thing is not getting a lot out of the backfield when it comes to targets and receptions. So that's probably taken a hit on his value. But if he can put up those rushing numbers, he also got into the end zone on the day. That stands out to me that while Kyron's out, he's going to be the lead guy.
Yeah, I agree. I think that touchdown did save his day, which is why I say I'm a little murky, just from the standpoint of I'm not sure that one of these guys is going to go off, and sure enough, now one of these guys is going to go off because I said it on here. But I just think that in these weeks where you have the bulk of your guys available, you probably have a better option in your lineup to start a different running back than one of these two guys.
Yep, I agree.
All right, so now we head to a rivalry matchup here at Lambeau Field. It is the Minnesota Vikings as they take on the Green Bay Packers. And Zach, let's first start with Minnesota, who comes off this monster win. I think we got to start with Jordan Addison. Like we said before, you're starting him. You're starting him as a higher end wide receiver right now. There is the potential that he gets more, but I think the target share truly is there for him to be pretty good every single week. As far as it goes with TJ Hawkinson, no doubt you're putting him in, obviously. Kirk Cousins, even, I think potential option as a streamer this week, just based on, again, high floor and there is the potential for a high ceiling with a guy like a Kirk Cousins. Obviously, he's not as available in any league, but it is a potential guy that you can go out and try to trade for that doesn't have a lot of value. He's one of those almost like buy lows. He's one of the most forgotten guys in fantasy every single year, Kirk Cousins, I think. Listen, he got picked in the last round of our redraft league, if you remember that. And that owner's now using him as his starter. And so it kind of he always gets forgotten. I'm not really sure why. And every year he just proves everybody wrong because he just goes off in fantasy. KJ Osborne, though, let's just break him. 6 targets. He had 5 catches for 47 yards. I think there is a role here for KJ Osborne. And Powell, he did okay. He got open quite a few times, had a couple good gains. I'm not sure that he's going to have too much of an option. But I would add KJ Osborne at least in leagues. Brandon Powell is probably like a very deep league add, but I'm sticking away from him. As far as the running backs go, this was interesting for Minnesota. Alexander Mattison, he had the first 5 running back carries. This one's from Clay of ESPN on X. Alexander Mattison handled the Vikings' first 5 running back carries last night. He registered a solid 35 yards. Cam Akers then handled 10 of the team's final 13 carries, hit 31 yards on those 10 attempts. Cam Akers, who's getting the workload, didn't do that well with the workload. Madison didn't get the workload. So to me, I'd say Madison still probably is the one. Akers is kind of breathing down his neck. I think we might see a bye straight down the middle when this is all said and done. For me this week, Madison, he's a flex because, again, I still think he's the one. Akers, though, stash him, though, just in case this becomes a bigger story.
Yeah, Brett, it's something to monitor, especially now this week against Green Bay, who's kind of struggled against the run so far this year. Like, I think Madison and Akers could end up splitting, like just like they did last week. Definitely something to look at. And we knew once the Vikings traded for Cam Akers that he would come in at some point and eat into Madison's workload. Did that last week, did not take advantage of it. Like you said, he did get a couple of receptions in the passing game that he turned into 30 yards, but definitely something to look at over the next couple of weeks in this matchup. I agree with you. Madison's still the one. He's a flex option right now. When you look at the wide receiver room, it's Addison as well as KJ Osborne could end up being a flex option, but a very low end flex option this week. And Hawkinson, obviously, you're starting him at tight end. And you mentioned Kirk Cousins. People keep just letting Kirk Cousins sit there. And this guy is putting up really solid fantasy numbers. He always has. The floor is very solid for Kirk Cousins. And I think that's the biggest thing going into this matchup. He's got a good matchup against Green Bay. I wouldn't be surprised if a ton of people were starting Kirk Cousins this week.
I just quickly want to, while we're on the topic of Minnesota, go to this viewer question that we just got from Joe. Do I trade Kupp for Achane and Jefferson? I have Diggs and ETN. I'm currently 5-2. Well, congrats to you because I think you have a pretty solid team there. Good core there. Trading Kupp for Achane and Jefferson. Obviously, Achane, Jefferson, both hurt, both on IR right now, going to miss a couple weeks. Zach, do you pull the plug on having Cooper Kupp just because you have Diggs and ETN with the potential that you then have Diggs, ETN, HN, and Jefferson stretch?
So this one's clear for me, and it's to take the deal. Like I think HN and Jefferson, the two of them combined, definitely outweighs what Cooper Kupp brings to you. And Cooper Kupp brings a really solid output. But I think he's not Justin Jefferson or Devon Achane when it comes to the speed, just everything going on. Those guys are like electrifying and put up a ton of fantasy numbers when they're in the lineup. I mean, Achane, you looked at it in the first couple of weeks when he started going off, like he didn't get a huge workload and he turned it into some of the biggest fantasy weeks of the season. So I think that really stands out to me. And of course, if you're getting Justin Jefferson and he's healthy with Kirk Cousins as his quarterback, like those two together definitely for me outweigh Cooper Kupp. Even though Cooper Kupp's great, I think those two are a lot better.
So consensus is take the deal because I think that it's not a dispute. I think that if you have solid options behind them that you can wait the couple weeks, I think it's pretty clear. HN will come back. Jefferson should come back with the Vikings record. And so, yeah, I would take that deal.
Yep, definitely.
All right, so now let's just quickly break down Green Bay. And I just want to start here with some injury report here. Christian Watson, he was a full participant today with the knee injury, and he should be good to go. Interesting to note is that Luke Musgrave with the ankle injury did not practice today, and Aaron Jones did not participate either. However, Matt LaFleur said he's just a bit sore. That's to be expected. Hopefully we can ramp him up and get some more snaps out there. And so they're trying to maximize here these next couple days to potentially put him in there against the Vikings. I fear, obviously, you're going to play Aaron Jones if he does go. A.J. Dillon has been meh. And so to me, it's probably one of those, if Aaron Jones is not going, then you probably put him in as your flex option just based on the fact that he might get into the end zone here. And he is good in the red zone. That said, the narrative has changed week to week, I think, completely on Green Bay of are they a good team on offense? Are they not a good team on offense? And it all kind of just come down to Jordan Love and making good decisions. Only had one interception in week 7. It was okay. Listen, they lost to Denver, and so it wasn't a great feeling. The crowd's really loud right now in Denver. Not a huge output from anybody, really. And so, listen, if Christian Watson comes back and he's fully healthy, then I think you got to obviously start Christian Watson. But otherwise, I'm a little murky on pretty much all fronts.
That's fair. I think Aaron Jones is still like in my lineup. Like I'm putting him in. I
Yeah,
drafted him to put him in my lineup. Although it wasn't great, like he still could be Aaron Jones. So that could step up.
yeah,
You're
of
going up
course.
against Minnesota, who struggled against McCaffrey. Obviously they grabbed the fumble, but like he definitely put in work against them last week. And I think the biggest thing for Green Bay is just getting things going in the passing game. I think once that happens, then it opens up the lane for Aaron Jones, and he can do Aaron Jones type things. I think right now we're looking Christian Watson's questionable, may not play this week. Obviously, news will come out later in the week, but yeah, I agree with you. There's really just not much else there. Like there isn't like Romeo Dobbs could be a flex option, but I think that's it. Like there's not a
Yeah.
ton there. If Watson's out, yeah, there's going to be people that are going to say, "Oh, well, I have to start Dobbs." All right, that's fair, but I don't know if you're going to get the greatest output versus some guys that you could put in your lineup instead. That's the one thing for me right now with Green Bay is the passing game. Once the passing game gets going, then everything else will work itself out. But they have not found a way to really get it going just yet.
Yeah, and it's just and it's interesting. Again, like I just said, week to week of the Jordan Love and the Jordan Love, and so until they actually like settle it on a consistent basis here, Green Bay is not exactly a team that I'm starting most of those guys.
Yeah, I agree with you.
All right, so now let's break down our next game here. It is New Orleans as they travel to Indianapolis. Zach, do you think this Gardner Minshew guy is a fluke here in this season?
Oh, best backup quarterback in all of the NFL. I mean, he's proven it week after week. He fits in perfectly. He's really, really solid for fantasy owners because they're getting the best out of Michael Pittman and Josh Downs. Like those two guys are really, really solid options. It pains me that I have just a lot of really good players ahead of Josh Downs that I just can't put him in my lineup. Like he just doesn't fit in there. I think the biggest thing right now is if I'm ever asking for a flex option, yeah, Josh Downs, while Gardner Minshew is at quarterback, could be top of the list. Like he is a rock solid option. You know what you're going to get. He's going to get a ton of targets. I think that's the biggest thing right now. Jonathan Taylor stepped up this week, Brett. He's back to normal. I think the biggest thing right now is he's in your lineup, and those three guys are really solid options. I feel comfortable with the Indy offense for the rest of the season with Gardner Minshew at quarterback because I feel like I know what I'm going to get from Jonathan Taylor, and I know what I'm getting out of the two wide receivers.
Yeah, what's great is that, I mean, even with workload that Taylor got, Zach Moss also got the workload, and so that's still there. And so I thought that was pretty interesting. Taylor getting 18 carries, 7 yards, and a touchdown to Moss's 18 carries for 57 yards, no touchdown. But the passing game kind of went back for Jonathan Taylor a bit, and he had 3 catches, 45 yards, broke off a nice little run there on one of them. Yeah, he's back. I think that, obviously you're starting Taylor. And then as far as it goes with Moss, like, yeah, you're probably not starting him, but I at least stash him because we know what he has been. It's a potential buy low, throw him into a trade on the back end of a trade, just based on the fact that we know what he was when Jonathan Taylor was there. And if you are a Jonathan Taylor owner, maybe it's a good idea to go and get the handcuff now, while his value is not what it was. But yeah, as far as it goes with Josh Downs, Zach, I mean, we'll talk about our lock of the week in a bit, but he was mine last week, and he was awesome. 125 yards, 5 catches, a touchdown. I think him and Gardner Minshew are pretty much one of the best duos in the entire NFL. Plain and simple. They've just proven like they know where each other are. And so to me this week, he's a great flex option. And I think every week going forward, he's a pretty good flex option. Michael Pittman's still the one, though. And, he only got 2 catches, 83 yards, a touchdown. He's still the number 1 receiver, even though it seems that, Downs is getting the work. The cornerbacks are still going to Pittman as the number 1, and rightfully so, because I think that he still is the number 1, no matter who's playing quarterback for the Colts. So I'm still starting Pittman. I think that Pittman, he's going to be a good option. Yes, he didn't get the workload last week, but I think that changes in the weeks ahead. And as far as it goes with Gardner Minshew, I am not starting him. Listen, I understand he had like 28 points in standard PPR leagues. You're not starting him. It's a fluke.
All right, that's fair. I think if he's this consistent week after week, and he's putting up, they put up a lot of points this offense. So that's what stands out. So if he keeps putting up points, and I feel like matchup wise, if he's got a really solid matchup, how can you pass him up if you're in need of one? Like that's the thing with me.
Yeah, there's a lot of people out there that are wearing their headbands and growing out their beards and wearing jean shorts on Sundays, just buying into the Minshew mania. I'm not one of those guys yet. And so while we'll reap the benefits of him by using, the Jonathan Taylors and the Michael Pittmans and the Josh Downs of the world, I'm still staying away from Gardner Minshew as my quarterback.
Yeah, definitely fair, Brett. But for New Orleans, I think it's going to be just Kamara, Olave, Michael Thomas, probably it. They stink right now, Brett. They're bad.
Yeah, it's interesting. And again, with Michael Thomas, I mean, listen, I hate to say I told you so, but it was a guy that early in the year where I was talking him up, like in the preseason, that this is a guy that looks like he might actually be healthy this year. And he was good where he was. He's gotten 8. I think he hasn't gotten under 7 targets any single game this year. Week 4, he got 6 targets, but the rest were all 7, 8, 9 targets every single week. Finally gets a touchdown last week, which was awesome to see on Thursday Night Football against Jacksonville. They're not that good. Plain and simple, they're not. Olave's been garbage. He had 50 targets, only caught 7 of them for 57 yards, no score. Michael Thomas has a very high floor, very low ceiling. He's a good flex option. Kamara had an insane amount of targets, 14 targets. He had 12 catches for 91 yards. You're putting him on, obviously. And then I'd say Derek Carr, listen, he had a really awful NFL game and a pretty standard to, above average fantasy game. And so you probably have to put him in as the super flex option. I'm not really going much higher than that. But he did have his best game of the year from a fantasy perspective on Thursday night, even though the ball 55 times and did not look good.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. Watch out what you're saying about my guy, Chris Olave. I feel like a lot of this is going on Derek Carr. 15 targets.
Oh, completely.
Yeah, we're talking about a guy in Chris Olave who's similarities to his buddy at Ohio State, Garrett Wilson. They make catches out of nothing, those two guys. Yeah. And 15 targets, if he's only catching 7 of them, it's probably not on Olave. Yeah, maybe 1 or 2, but there's a lot of just miscommunication that I don't know what it is. Carr, just put it in an area. Let him go get it. I think that's the biggest thing with Olave. He hasn't been able to do that just yet. I think that comes with more time with Carr, but I'm a frustrated Olave owner, Brett.
I would quite honestly say that Olave right now is a big buy low guy in both redraft and in dynasty. There are a lot of Olave owners that are he's not going to be the real deal in dynasty. And so might be an opportunity for you to slip in and grab a guy like that. He's gotten double-digit targets in every single game except for 2. So, while the quarterback has not been amazing, and obviously there was, got a little testy there on the sidelines last week. between him and Derek Carr. And then, the video comes out today from Jacksonville, and they have Carr on the hot mic screaming, "What are you doing? Run," which is not a great look at all. I think things will change and things will look up for a lot, but right now he's kind of at rock bottom.
Yeah, and if he's at rock bottom at 7 receptions and on 15 targets,
yeah, pretty good.
It's not the worst thing.
Yeah, pretty good, and still scoring double-digit fantasy points. And so, we've seen what the ceiling can be, and now we're witnessing what the floor is, and it's pretty high.
Yeah, definitely, Brett.
All right, so now we head out to Washington as the Philadelphia Eagles will take on Washington, and there's a lot of unhappy Philadelphia fans. Just, feel for them with the Phillies and the, all the close championship taste they've had in the last little while. But it seems that the Eagles are still rolling here, looking like they're one of the best teams in all of football. A.J. Brown, another monster game in week 7. He had 10 catches, 137 yards, a touchdown on 15 targets. The dude's a monster. Plain and simple. Dallas Goedert, he got himself going also. 5 catches on 5 targets, 77 yards and a touchdown. I think both of those two are what's rolling right now in the offense. And it seems that Devonta Smith, even though he's also sort of a buy low candidate right now, he only had 4 catches for 49 yards and seems to be the odd man out.
Yeah, it's just the situation that they're in. But I feel like if you drafted Devonta Smith, you knew that A.J. Brown was going to be there. You knew that Dallas Goedert was going to be there. You knew that it's a run-heavy offense. So, I mean, kind of expected heading into this season that, yes, of course you would want Smith to do a little bit more, but we're definitely looking at a team that's focusing on their 2 guys that are working right now, especially with Goddard and A.J. Brown. So they've really stepped up. I think that's the biggest thing that just you got to keep focusing on. Of course, Devonta Smith's a buy low right now, Brett. Easily. That's completely. He's the odd man out right now. And it's not his fault. It's just they have 2 options that are really working right now. Why not? Why would they go away from that? So that's the biggest thing for Philly right now. I think you're starting Brown and Goddard easily. Smith is kind of fallen into flex consideration. He's fallen into that category. And then I think the thing with Swift and Hurts, you're going to keep starting them as long as they're healthy.
Yeah, totally agree. I think that just from quickly for a dynasty perspective, it's another guy who there's a lot of rumblings out there. Are they going to pay him? Who are the Eagles going to pay? And so there's a lot of noise out there that Smith might not be getting some money. And just like you're hearing right now with T. Higgins being the second guy over in his wide receiver core, we're going to start to hear the same thing. I think the headlines are going to get louder and louder on Smith. And so keep an eye on that as a potential buy low window.
Yeah, I agree with you, Brett.
So just quickly breaking down Washington, I'm staying away from pretty much everybody. McLaurin, play him.
Yeah, I think McLaurin and then Brian Robinson's a flex guy. I think that's
I would agree with that too. Sam Howell came back down to earth, and so plain and simple, and he did it against the Giants, and so I'm not playing him against the Eagles, certainly.
Yeah, I agree with you there.
All right, so now let's jump over to our next matchup. It is Cleveland at Seattle. And Zach, we got to first start with that wide receiver core and the big story there in Seattle, I think. DK Metcalf obviously depends on what his status is, but if he is there, then you're playing him, obviously, and then you're playing Lockett, but I don't know that you're playing Jackson Jig if DK is there.
Yeah, Brett, I think it goes back to just the weeks before that DK was playing and how this offense was moving around. I think you just have to go back to that. And of course, JSN really was struggling during that. I do think it's a good matchup here. Although the Browns have been solid, they're coming off a week where they stunk on defense. They let Indy go to town on them. And we're talking now about an offense in Seattle that's kind of similar in than Indy, where they're focusing on the run to get them going. Kenneth Walker, really solid option. He was actually the only running back in the NFL this past week, Brett, with over 100 rushing yards, which is kind of
Wow.
crazy to say. Yeah, there was a lot of guys on bye weeks, but you just see the consistency of Kenneth Walker, and it's really right before your eyes. Like, he is perfect, and probably an RB1. Like, he's in that area right now, just based on his consistency, excuse me, and how rock solid he's been. I think it's a good matchup for these two wide receivers in Metcalf and Lockett. I think there's some space in that Cleveland secondary, even though people are like, oh, well, they're still really good. This Seattle offense knows how to move the ball up the field.
Yeah, and I would also just say that, the workload's there. Obviously, Zach Charbonnet is banged up. He missed last week, and so I think Kenneth Walker becomes pretty much a lineup block. He got 20 carries, so the workload completely there for him. And then obviously Geno, low end super flex, I'd say, probably that's probably where he is this week with the not as great matchup against Cleveland. And then just quickly breaking down Cleveland, we talked running back before. Obviously doubtful on Jerome Ford, and so don't really think he's going to start. You probably put Kareem Hunt in if that is the case. I'm staying away from Pierre Strong Jr. I understand that people are very excited about him. I'm not one of those people. And then, David Njoku, and that's it, I think. Yeah,
Cooper was not great last week. He had 8 targets with PJ Walker. It was Deshaun for a couple minutes, and then it was PJ Walker for the rest of the game. 8 targets, but only 2 receptions for 22 yards. I don't know how confident I am in Amari Cooper. Just going up against Seattle. Seattle's going to find a way to kind of lock him down.
Yeah, I think right now he's probably a flex option at best. And so, I think that they're going to try to channel in on him. And so that's what knocks him out of my lineup as far as when I'm considering who I want to play in my flex spot. But let's just jump right to the next matchup here. Baltimore at Arizona. Zach, first off, just some news came out today, and it was that Kyler Murray practiced. And so the future for Arizona actually looks pretty bright here. Kyler guy is being added in a lot of our redraft leagues, actually, just to stash on the end of the bench. And I think that's a pretty smart move. It's a guy that has the potential of finishing as a top 10 quarterback each and every week.
Yeah, I agree with you. And of course, when he comes back, they're going to figure out ways to get this offense going. Like, this offense has been solid under Josh Dobbs, but it's going to be on another level when Kyler Murray comes back. Of course, he built that chemistry last season with Hollywood Brown. I think Hollywood Brown, it gets a massive upgrade if Kyler comes back in the next couple, like a really solid target he has. And like I said, they built that chemistry. There was DeAndre Hopkins was there for a little bit last year, and it kind of took away Hollywood's value. Of course, he got injured too. But before that, I had him on my roster, Brett. Like 7 of the first 8 weeks, he was like top 10. He was rock solid. So I think that's the biggest thing when it comes to Arizona. Just that there's nobody else. James Conner's on IR. I don't trust any of the running backs. They're going up against a tough as nails Baltimore defense. I think Hollywood's probably the only one I'm starting this week, Brett.
Yeah, I agree. I think that as far as Trey McBride goes, obviously we found out about the injury to Zach Ertz. They put him on IR. That's a guy I'm going out and just grabbing and stashing for this week. I'm not playing right now, but I think that the volume will continue. Obviously, we just spoke about Kyler Murray. I think that down the stretch last year, Kyler and him had a pretty good connection, leading to McBride finishing as a top 10 tight end in the last, I think it was 6 or 7 weeks of the season. And so, I think that that'll be a guy to go out and grab. But, I think Hollywood Brown's a guy that you're starting. DeMercado is probably a deep flex option.
Yeah, I agree with you there. And quickly, Brett, for Baltimore, Lamar was great last week. Really good. One of the best weeks of the season, probably his best week of the season. And it was crazy to say he had 357 passing yards, Brett. I don't think I ever thought there would be a day where Lamar had over 350 in the air. That's just it. The offense was working and the passing game's working. And while that's going on, like Zay Flowers, Mark Andrews, really solid options. I think I'd put Gus Edwards back on the flex radar just because I feel like he's proven he's the number one guy. It wasn't great last week. Like he had that 80-yard reception out of the backfield. So that's the one thing, the positive in the passing game. But 14 carries, 64 yards, did get the touchdown. So I think it's just solid numbers. Like I said, I think he's on the flex radar.
Yeah, I agree. I think Gus Bus is definitely on the flex radar for me. You're starting Flowers, you're starting Andrews, you're starting Lamar. I don't think that there's any dispute. I will say that Odell, who did have a good game, he is staying on the bench for me this week. I don't know that until he starts to work himself back into a workload, I don't know how you really can consider putting him there.
Yeah, I agree with you, Brett. Just need to see some consistency first from him.
Yep. So breaking down our next one, Taylor Swift and Kansas City Chiefs and Travis Kelce will go into Denver, where Taylor Swift actually set the attendance record. It was Ed Sheeran. And they will take on the Broncos, who come off of a win. Hey, check that out. And so the Denver Broncos coming in. But Zach, let's first start with Kansas City. I mean, it's, I don't really want to repeat what we say every single week, but start your guys, number one.
Yeah, business as usual. It's a massive matchup for them. Denver's defense has been solid the last couple of weeks, but of course, the worst run defense, like Pacheco, I'm expecting a much better game from last week. Game script just really hurt him at the end of last week's game.
Yeah, I think that also, a lot of people got excited about Valdez-Scantling, only 3 catches, 4 yards. So, yeah, he scored fantasy points, but I'm leaving him out there. I'm not grabbing him. But, yeah, Rashee Rice is the one. Business as usual, just like you said. Quickly on Denver, I'm curious what the next week brings for Denver and how it impacts fan football. As far as the receivers go, Jerry Jeudy, Courtland Sutton. They both had pretty okay games. I mean, Courtland Sutton finished 6 catches for 76 yards and a score. Jerry Jeudy had 5 catches for 64 yards, didn't get the score. But they both were pretty solid. And so I'm curious if this is a showcase game here going up against Kansas City on a game that's going to be national television in most markets around the country. You're probably not playing Jerry Jeudy this week from a fantasy perspective. You probably are playing Courtland Sutton as your flex option. And, Javonte is Javonte. You're putting Javonte in 15 carries, 82 yards. I'm looking for him to get into the end zone.
I'm praying. Just fall into the end zone. Do it once for me, Javonte. I agree with you, Brett. It's Javonte and Courtland Sutton. That's really it for Denver. It's a tough Kansas City defense they're going up against.
Yep. So now let's just quickly jump here as we bounce around to the last of the 4:00 games. It is San Francisco as they host Cincinnati. Should be a pretty good matchup. McCaffrey, he practiced in full. So that was today, the news that came out with the oblique. Brock Purdy has just been like 12-2 days. And yes, we talk concussion protocol. He might not play this week. It might be Sam Darnold. Even if Brock Purdy plays, first 5 games of the year, he went 5-0 compared to the last 2, which have been losses. Completion percentage went from 72% down to 58%. His yards per attempt also dropped from 9.3 down to 7. Touchdowns to interceptions. He had 9 touchdowns, 0 interceptions in the first 5 games. So far in the last 2 games, he's had only 2 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. And so his quarterback rating dropped from an 85 down to a 50. This is, again, tale of 2 cities here for Brock Purdy. Not very confident in him. He's probably a good super flex option. He's not a starter radar for me this week. And then I would just say, as far as the rest of the offense goes, business as usual. Like we said for the other ones, you're playing Ayuk, you're playing Kittle, you're playing McCaffrey. Deebo, we'll see what happens. Obviously, he's going to be out for a couple of weeks. And so potential buy low guy, maybe, Zach?
Yeah, he is, just because it's not been typical Deebo. Like, he's struggled a
Yeah.
lot this season so far, and he's a buy low. If somebody wants him, you might as well give him up, because
Yeah.
he's not giving you enough right now. I'll say I agree with you. All three of those guys, McCaffrey, Ayuk, and Kittle, are starting this week. And we mentioned before, Juwan Jennings, just stash him on your bench for now.
Quickly, let's just to this viewer question from Parker. Start 2: Jacobs, Gibbs, Ramondre, James Cook.
Brad, this is a tough one. I don't know how you can bench Jacobs, so I'd
You can't.
probably put him in, and that's a tough one because Ramondre struggled, but I don't know. I don't know what I'm getting with Gibbs. I feel like in Ramondre, you're getting that passing game value in a matchup I think they'll be down in against Miami. Gibbs, I think they're going to blow him out. I think it's going to be a blowout. So he's not going to get a ton of work in the passing game. It's kind of toss up here, Brett, between those two, Gibbs and Ramondre. If I had to pick one, just based on those matchups, I'd pick Ramondre.
Yeah, I agree completely. I think that that's where it's going to come through. And I think that Ramondre might get into the passing game based on the fact that it might be a blowout and they're going to have to start to throw the ball. Sky might be falling for them. And so, yeah, I would start Jacobs and start Ramondre in that one.
Yep.
All right. So now we just quickly go over to Cincinnati. And Zach, I mean, you're starting your guys. I don't know if there's any other way. You're starting Mixon, you're starting Chase, you're starting Burrow, T. Higgins, he's going in the lineup. But as far as T. Higgins goes, probably flex option. And that's kind of changed in the last couple weeks here, where since that game in week 2 where he's finished with almost 30 points, it hasn't been the same T. Higgins that we know. And again, another guy that you can probably try to go out and buy low right now, especially in Dynasty, where there's a lot of contract and him getting paid by some other team.
Yeah, I just think right now you got to just plug him in at flex. I think that's just where he belongs right now, just because he's just not getting the same volume. I don't know what it is. It's a little off right now. I think it'll turn around as the season goes on, but for right now, he's a flex option at best.
Yeah. Quickly, just Parker following up on his last one for his flex spot. So obviously, I guess those are his 2 running backs. But so then he has Cook, Gibbs, Amari Cooper, and Hollywood Brown. Zach, take it away.
So Buffalo's playing Tampa Bay. I'd put Gibbs then.
I agree.
I was like, it's a toss-up between Ramondre and Gibbs. You got the open spot, put Gibbs in there because he's still going to have a really solid output. I just think Ramondre has a little more upside into his matchup.
Yeah, I think going against the Baltimore defense is going to be a little tough there for Hollywood Brown. And as we just spoke about in the Seattle matchup against Cleveland, Amari Cooper's probably going to get shadowed pretty heavily this week. So, yeah, I'm going with the 2 running backs there.
Yep, definitely.
All right, so now just, like I said, you're going with your regulars here in Cincinnati. T. Higgins, a lot of noise, very good buy low candidate, especially in Dynasty. A guy that a lot of people are very low on. But let's just break down now Chicago at the LA Chargers. Zach, what's going on with Quentin Johnston?
I don't know, Brett. I don't know. It's just hasn't been the best rookie year for him. I think people may have gotten some optimism when Mike Williams went out with injury. Okay, Quentin Johnston's just going to slot in. Nope, that's Josh Palmer. He's slotting in instead. I think that's the biggest thing right now. Palmer's going to be in lineups as a flex option for this matchup. They're going up against Chicago, who's been better against the pass defense the last couple of weeks, but I'm still confident in this offense under Justin Herbert. I think Eckler and Allen, of course, they're locks in your lineup. And then Herbert, of course, at quarterback. Josh Palmer, like I said, he's a flex option. I would also, depending on news with injuries, you can maybe figure out one of the two tight ends, Everett or Parham, Brett.
Yeah, agree. I was just going to add to that, with the tight ends, there's solid options in this offense and one of those guys where they can easily fall into the end zone. And so agree on all fronts. And quickly on to add on Quentin Johnston, I think he could end up being the bust of the first round from those skill positions. It's a little scary just how they're using him, and you actually watch the plays and they're using him as a decoy on some plays. He's only had 7 catches for the entire season. Not really many yards. And so it's just, it's weird.
Yeah, it's something to worry about right now. I think as obviously in Dynasty, you're holding them, and the future will probably be better for you.
Yeah, well, you hope so.
True.
But just quickly, let's jump into our Monday Night Football game. Las Vegas Raiders taking on the Detroit Lions, and I just spoke about it, but could be the Gibbs show here.
It could be the Gibbs show. I think Goff, you probably took a week off from him. Hopefully you took a week off from him. If you didn't, you're probably not happy. But if you did, like I did, then plug him back in your lineup. I think he's going to have some motivation to really prove people after the slamming they got last week in Baltimore. I'm full go with this offense. Amon-Ra, Laporta, I think, of course, Gibbs and Monty's going to be out, and then start Goff, because I think that's the biggest thing for me right now is they're going to be bouncing back from last week.
Yeah, I mean, they got their butts handed to them, plain and simple. They didn't play the same game that they normally play, and that's what I think was so different about this game. Normally you see run, and then you think they're going to run again, and they hit you with a play action and throw one right over the linebackers to a guy crossing over the middle, whether it's Jameson Williams, Amon-Ra St. Brown. They got away from that a bit. And so, yeah, they were kind of like forced to throw the ball, got through it 53 times. So obviously, Amon-Ra, he got 19 targets in the game. So obviously you're playing him. You're playing Sam Laporta, who only got 7 targets, but 6 of them were catches for 52 yards, didn't get in the end zone. But, yeah, I think that they're going to try to get back to that run, hit them with the play action, because last week was just abysmal. And, again, like we're talking Las Vegas here, like just their defensive front, Max Crosby, like that's going to be who they have to stop. And so it's going to have to be confused Max Crosby. And I think that their system that they've been using the entire season might end up doing that for them.
Yeah, agreed, Brett. And for Vegas, it's Jacobs and Adams, and that's it.
Yeah, and that's it. That's it. I don't know that you can trust anybody on that team. Obviously, like banged up quarterback, like probably not playing, and so yeah, you can't really trust anybody.
Yeah, Jacoby Myers, one of the big names that you just cannot trust.
Right. Okay, so now let's just head into our lock of the week here as we break down this show. And Zach, last week I picked Josh Downs, and I think that was a pretty good pick. We could argue that you picked Donta Foreman, but you didn't. You picked Roschon Johnson, who did not play. So we had 0 points. Josh Downs, 23.5. And so, Zach, you're up 4-2 in the standing right now on Lock of the Week, but I'm going to go first here as I won last week. And I'm taking Josh Palmer. I think that this is a guy that is very solid, and just based on the target share, could end up having a pretty good game against Chicago. Who's not that good.
That's fair. I think I'm going on the opposite side, and I'm taking him again. We're rolling with it. Roschon Johnson. He was a full participant. He was a full participant in practice on Wednesday. He's playing probably this weekend out of concussion protocol. He's got a great matchup this week in LA against the Chargers. I'm rolling with him. He's going to have a monster week. Let's do it again.
Insanity is doing the same thing over and over. We will see if Roschon Johnson actually does get to play in this game and, what the output is. Let's just quickly go to our ones to watch here. And these are guys that are owned less than 50% of standard Yahoo and ESPN leagues. Zach, I'm taking Dalton Kincaid. I mean, we spoke about him earlier in the podcast. It's just a guy who has such an opportunity in front of him right now. Obviously, Buffalo losing Boston is a huge help to Kincaid's value. He had 8 catches, 75 yards, didn't score a touchdown. However, he's rostered in just less than 50%. And so he's a guy who should be rostered in pretty much every league right now. Obviously, tight end premium is a whole other avenue. But as far as it goes in regular redraft leagues, one tight end leagues, like he's a guy who could end up being a game winner or a league winner because of the volume that he could potentially get working with Josh Allen.
Yeah, Brett, that's definitely a guy on the radar right now, especially if Dawson Knox is out. Like Dalton Kincaid can really get a good amount of that target share and could end up being really maybe the second option in that offense behind Stephon Diggs. I'm looking at Kendrick Bourne. We talked about him a little bit before. I think he's in that flex radar right now. A lot of people picked him up this week, but Brett, he's still at 36%, even after all those ads this week. I think you got to get him right now. Of course, the volume stands out to me. Just getting those targets and putting up big numbers, you got to pick him up right now. He's got another good matchup against Miami this week.
And a shout out to Dad who went out and grabbed him last week before any of this came about. And so, yeah, he basically can put him right in his lineup now this week. But yeah, it's a solid pick. It's a solid pick. Just based on the share of targets and the workload that he's getting there. Definitely a solid option. I think both of our picks this week from flex options and so both solid options and yeah, it's kind of interesting now because we're going to see a lot of showcasing this week, I think, as far as the trade line coming up on Tuesday and who gets moved and how does that change fantasy value? Obviously, last year we saw Christian McCaffrey moved. Will we see another big name moved like that, like a Derrick Henry or something? What do you think?
I think that we could. Like the NFL is always like these teams are always looking at ways to improve. Of course, mid-season, there's some teams that you probably didn't expect to be struggling and they're trying to improve right now. I think we definitely could be in for a big one. I'm excited to see what happens in the next week or so, Brett.
And it's just interesting based on the fact the running back market and the contracts and all of that. We could end up seeing a guy like a Derrick Henry move. I could really see it just based on that. If you pay him, you probably don't have to pay him that much with the contract disputes going on around the league.
Yep, definitely, Brett.
All right, so please subscribe to us on YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. Give us a thumbs up, and in the words of Aaron Rodgers, the night is darkest before the dawn. We shall rise yet again. We will catch you all for our Week 9 preview next week. Enjoy the football week, everyone.